You walk into a room and something feels off. Nobody says anything unusual. No one looks suspicious. But a quiet part of you already knows. Someone is hiding something. You don't have proof. You don't need it. It's not about the way they move or the tone of their voice. It's something deeper, like a whisper under the surface of reality. A vibration you can't explain, but that you've learned not to ignore. Maybe it's a friend who seems perfectly fine, but their smile feels hollow. 3 weeks later, they break down in tears and tell you they're leaving their partner. And all you can think is, I knew it. Or maybe you've dreamed about things before they happened. Vivid images that seem random at the time until real life starts catching up to your subconscious. This isn't a parlor trick or intuition in the casual sense. It's something harder to live with, something more dangerous. You've probably learned not to talk about it. Because when you do, when you mention the feeling, or the dream, or the sense that something's wrong, people either brush it off or look at you like you've lost your mind. You get told you're too sensitive, overthinking, or just imagining things. But deep down, you know better. You feel better. You're not guessing, you're perceiving. And while the world keeps rewarding people who see what's obvious, you're stuck carrying a mind that sees what's hidden. You track patterns no one else sees. You catch lies without trying. You know who's in pain, even when they're smiling. And that kind of perception, it's not a gift in the usual sense. Psychologist Carl Jung called it something else entirely. He said it's one of the most dangerous psychological traits a person can be born with. Not dangerous to others, but dangerous to you. When most people hear the word dangerous, they think of aggression, violence, or unpredictability. But Carl Jung meant something very different. He wasn't describing a threat to others. He was warning about a personality type so inwardly intense, so finely attuned to hidden psychological content, that the real danger was internal collapse. He was talking about people who live with what he called introverted intuition as their dominant function. People whose minds don't operate in the concrete world of touch, sight, logic, and numbers, but instead pull information directly from the unconscious, as if reality were whispering to them in a secret symbolic language. Jung called this function perception via the unconscious. And to him, it was both extraordinary and incredibly volatile. You see, Jung believed that introverted intuition is more than just a psychological quirk. It's a structural difference in how certain minds interpret reality. While most people are focused on what's obvious, what can be proven, touched, measured, the intuitive introvert bypasses the surface altogether. They see beneath things. They pick up on the silent power dynamics in a conversation, the tension hiding under someone's smile, the outcome of a situation before it even begins to unfold. But this kind of vision comes with a cost, because you're not just observing reality, you're decoding it, constantly. Your brain doesn't turn off, you're always sensing, always interpreting. And while everyone else gets to rest in the comfort of what's tangible, you're stuck in a state of constant psychological input. Jung said this experience, if not carefully managed, could lead to confusion, isolation, even identity fragmentation. That's why he didn't call it a blessing. He called it a burden, a gift wrapped in a psychological landmine. And for those born with it, the question isn't, how do I use this power? It's, how do I survive it? Imagine living in two realities at once. There's the world that everyone else sees. What's said out loud, what's provable, what appears on the surface. Then there's the world you see. Silent motivations, unspoken conflicts, hidden emotions, and future outcomes whispering through the air before they even exist. This isn't imagination. It's not fantasy. It's your default setting. And while it may seem like an incredible skill, Jung argued that it puts you in a psychologically precarious position. Because most people are grounded in what's immediately observable. What happened, who said what you can touch or measure. But your primary function, introverted intuition, leaves you anchored not in what is, but in what could be, what's beneath what is, or what's about to happen. And that kind of dual awareness can be destabilizing. Over time, this split between inner and outer realities begins to widen. You start to feel like an outsider in your own life. Everyone else is reacting to the surface, while you're consumed by the undercurrent. You sit in a room and hear one thing, but feel another entirely. You watch a relationship unfold and know it's doomed before either person does. You sense that someone is hiding something, and 3 months later, the truth comes out. But you've learned the hard way that pointing it out early only makes things worse. People don't want their illusions disturbed. They don't want to be seen too clearly, so you stay quiet. And that silence builds up like pressure behind your eyes, because your insights don't stop coming just because the world won't listen. They just swirl inside your mind, louder, faster, deeper, until you start to question which reality is even real anymore, the one everyone else sees, or the one only you can feel. At first, your insights feel like superpowers. You can read people's motives before they speak. You can sense relationships unraveling months before they end. You predict events, anticipate changes, and see the deeper patterns behind people's choices. It's intoxicating. You begin to feel chosen, special, like maybe you were born with access to something higher, and you're not wrong. But this is where the first psychological trap opens: archetypal inflation. Jung saw it again and again in his patients. The ego, overwhelmed by the sheer power of the unconscious insights flooding in, begins to identify with those insights. Instead of seeing yourself as a person receiving symbols or archetypes, you begin to become them. You're no longer just someone who sees deeply. You're the seer, not just someone who helps others. You're the healer, the oracle, the wise one. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin playing a role written by your own unconscious. You stop connecting with people as equals. Instead, you feel like you're observing them from a psychological mountain. Not out of arrogance, out of separation. And that separation grows. You lose the ability to speak plainly, to be ordinary, to just be. Instead, everything becomes symbolic. Every conversation is decoded. Every moment holds a hidden meaning. Every dream is a message. And your ego starts to depend on this sense of symbolic specialness to survive. Jung warned that this is when the intuitive introvert begins to lose their footing. You're no longer grounded in human connection. You're floating in myth. Your identity fuses with the archetypes you perceive, and you stop being a person with a gift and become a character in a psychological story you can't escape. And while it may feel powerful, it's actually a subtle form of possession. Because once you become the archetype, you stop being able to choose who you are. You've probably heard the phrase empath tossed around casually. But what Jung observed in intuitive introverts went far deeper and became far more dangerous. He noticed that people with dominant introverted intuition didn't just perceive others' emotions, they absorbed them, not on purpose, not because they lacked boundaries, but because their minds operated like psychic receivers, tuned to unconscious frequencies most people don't even know exist. Over time, this sensitivity becomes overwhelming. You walk into a room and feel fine, until suddenly you're anxious, angry, or sad for no apparent reason. You're not just noticing that someone nearby is depressed. You're feeling it in your chest, as if it were your own. This is what modern psychology might call psychic contamination, but Jung saw it first. He wrote about intuitive introverts who had completely lost the ability to distinguish between their own psychological material and that of others. Their identities became porous, bleeding into the emotional bodies of everyone around them. They'd take on the wounds of others without realizing it. They'd try to solve emotional puzzles that weren't theirs to solve. They'd feel crushed by the weight of pain they couldn't name, because it wasn't theirs to begin with. And the tragedy, they often thought it was, that they were broken, that they were unstable, that something inside them was too heavy, too chaotic, too much. But what was actually happening was a kind of unconscious merging, a dissolving of the boundary between self and other. This led many intuitive introverts to disappear into other people's needs, stories, and trauma. They'd become the fixer, the rescuer, the emotional caretaker. And though that role felt meaningful, it was also exhausting. Because when everything feels personal, when every room leaves a mark on you, when every relationship feels like a responsibility, you eventually forget who you are. Your own identity becomes a ghost, blurred by the shadows you've taken on. This is the point where the mind begins to slip. Not because you've gone mad, but because you've been living between worlds for too long. After years of navigating the unseen, tracking emotions, decoding symbols, absorbing unspoken tension, your connection to the physical, to the here and now, begins to fray. You don't mean for it to happen. It's subtle at first. A loss of interest in the mundane. A growing sense that conversations about everyday things, bills, errands, social events, feel painfully empty. You start feeling more alive in dreams than in real life. You begin interpreting chance events, numbers, songs, overheard phrases as signs meant just for you. Reality becomes symbolic. Everything means something. Nothing feels random. And that's exactly where the danger lies. Jung called this the most treacherous point in the intuitive introvert's journey, possession by the unconscious. It's when the symbolic world becomes so vivid, so emotionally charged, that it overtakes the material one. And while this might sound spiritual or even magical, Jung didn't romanticize it. He warned about it. Because when you can no longer tell the difference between what's symbolically true and what's literally true, the mind becomes untethered. You begin to see patterns that aren't there. You make decisions based on inner visions rather than outer facts. You drift into magical thinking, believing the universe is speaking to you in every shadow and flicker of light. You start to live as though you're starring in a myth and forget to pay attention to the real-life consequences unfolding around you. This is how powerful minds collapse, not through trauma, but through overexposure to the unconscious. Your inner world becomes so vast, so consuming, that reality starts to feel like an afterthought. And that's when the cracks deepen. When people start to pull away. When jobs are lost, relationships fracture, and nothing feels solid anymore. At this point, many intuitive introverts break. They retreat further inward. They surrender to the chaos. But a rare few choose a different path. They begin the slow, demanding, transformational work of integration. If you've made it this far without collapsing under the weight of your own mind, you're already doing something rare, because most intuitive introverts never escape stage 2. They get stuck in the cycle of silence, psychic overload, and symbolic obsession. But for those who do escape, those who refuse to let their gift become their undoing, stage 3 begins. Jung called this the path of individuation, the journey of becoming a whole person, not by rejecting your intuition, but by learning to hold it properly. And to do that, there are 3 essential skills every intuitive introvert must master. Without them, your insight remains a burden. With them, it becomes a force that can reshape your life and even the world around you. The first skill is grounding through sensation. Jung observed that intuitive introverts are deeply disconnected from their bodies. Their weakest psychological function is sensation, the ability to anchor themselves in the present moment, in physical experience, in tangible reality. And so, the mind floats, untethered, prone to drowning in symbols. The antidote is surprisingly simple, but profoundly effective. Return to the body. This doesn't mean abandoning your inner world. It means creating a stable foundation for it. Practices like walking barefoot on the earth, slow mindful movement, cooking with attention, or working with your hands are more than just hobbies. They're lifelines. They create a rhythm, a presence, a reliable physical anchor that keeps the unconscious from swallowing you whole. The second skill is translating the invisible into the visible. Many intuitive introverts live with powerful insights, but never speak them, write them, or build anything from them. And when insight has nowhere to go, it turns inward and rots. Integration means giving form to what you see. That might look like writing, painting, music, theory building, or storytelling. It's not about being creative in the traditional sense. It's about externalizing the internal. Jung himself did this with his Red Book, filling its pages with symbols, drawings, and reflections that mapped his inner world. You don't need to publish or perform, but you do need to express, because expression turns chaos into clarity. It turns perception into wisdom. The third skill is the most subtle and the most essential, maintaining psychological boundaries while staying open. When you're tuned in to others' emotions, trauma, and unconscious material, you can't afford to be wide open all the time. You must learn when to open the channel and when to shut it. This is what Jung called conscious permeability. You remain receptive to intuitive data, but you no longer merge with it. You begin to recognize, this sadness I feel isn't mine. This fear doesn't belong to me. You develop inner filters, cleansing rituals, mental separation between yourself and what you sense. This boundary work isn't cold or selfish, it's survival. Because once you know how to stay yourself, even in the presence of overwhelming insight, you stop drowning in everyone else's energy. You become steady, strong, a vessel, not a sponge. And when all three of these skills come together, something remarkable happens. Your gift stabilizes. The visions don't stop, but they stop destroying you. The symbolic world still speaks, but it no longer hijacks your choices. You move through life with clarity, precision, and a kind of quiet power. You stop feeling like a ghost in your own life and start feeling like a bridge. A rare kind of person who can walk between the world of meaning and the world of action. Someone who sees clearly and lives fully. Someone who doesn't just survive their sensitivity, but uses it to light the way for others. So now the question becomes, where are you in the journey? Are you in stage 1, just beginning to notice your perceptions go deeper than anyone around you? Are you still marveling at the gift, not yet aware of its weight? Or are you in stage 2, where the silence has started to feel like isolation? Where your mind is full, but no one seems to understand? Maybe you've begun to question your own sanity, caught between visions and reality. Or maybe you're stepping into stage 3, the beginning of integration, where insight becomes power, not pain. No matter where you are, know this: you're not alone. Jung believed that those who navigate this path often go on to become healers, creators, visionaries, because they can see what others miss, but only if they survive it. And that survival begins with awareness. So let's hear your story. What's the most powerful intuitive hit you've ever had? What part of this journey resonated with you the most? Drop it in the comments below. You never know who you might help by sharing. If this spoke to something inside you, consider liking the video. It helps the right people find it. And if you're ready to keep going deeper, subscribe. because in the next episode, we're exploring shadow work, the side of Jung most people get completely wrong. Until then, protect your sensitivity, trust your perception, and above all, stay grounded. Because the world needs what you see, but only if you don't lose yourself in the process.